fourth group came from Spain, the Spanish. So these are different tattoo patterns of the different peoples in those regions. And you'll see some similarities, yet some differences between all of our different tattoos. Remember, these people, they visited other lands through navigating with their boats and their canoes, and they're really good at navigating through using the stars. Next slide. Next slide. So when people see our tattoos, they think automatically they're Hawaiian tattoos, right? Because most people have never even thought that Filipinos have their own tattoos. So immediately people say, oh, you're Hawaiian. I say, no, these are Ifugao tattoos. What's Ifugao? Well, Ifugao is a tribe in the Philippines. And so it's a teaching moment for the most part when people ask me about my tattoos. But a lot of the symbols on our tattoos are very similar because we come from similar geography. We have similar cosmologies and similar beliefs. So you'll see a lot of similarities in the patterns and symbols in our tattoos. We're all interrelated as island people. Next slide. So here's the Philippines. This is Palawan right here. And then remember, there are 7,100 different islands just in the Philippines. But throughout Southeast Asia, you have all these little islands. So people weren't necessarily traveling long distances by boat across the open ocean. They were just island hopping until they got to major island groups from all over Southeast Asia. And that's how this interchange of culture happened for thousands and thousands of years throughout the Philippines and throughout Southeast Asia and Polynesia. Next slide. Next slide. So I'm going to speak specifically about the Filipino warrior tattoos. This picture was taken, when was this taken? I think in August, just this past summer. And we try to have regular gatherings of our tribe members down in Southern California where we're headquartered. And if you look at the patterns on all of our chests, and the chest tattoos are called chaklags, and they're very specific to specific tribes. So there is no such thing as a Filipino warrior tattoo. Each tattoo belongs to a specific tribe. So my tattoos, Ifugao, are very different than the Kalinga tattoos, are very different than the Ibaloy tattoos, are very different than the Visayan tattoos. And I was explaining to one of my friends earlier, it's sort of like the Super Bowl tomorrow, right? You got all these people on the field, but how do you know who's on which team and the other team? And it's because of the color of the uniforms. But in the Philippines, when we're all fighting in the jungles or on the beaches, we all look the same, right? How do you know who's on that team and this team, or that tribe and that tribe? It's from the way our tattoo patterns are put on our body. Also, after the battle, you might have a bunch of dead Filipino warriors, but their heads are missing because we were headhunters. How do you know that's Dion, or how do you know that's Alex, or how do you know that's Jim? You don't know because their head is missing, but you know because of their tattoos. Okay? And contrary to what some of the earlier U.S. history books said, Filipinos were not cannibals. We did not cut off the heads of our enemies and eat the flesh. We were not cannibals. Next slide. So, as I said earlier, each tribe's tattoo is distinct. Now, the Philippines is sort of like here in America. We have dozens and dozens of Native American tribes, right? The Apache, the Chumash, the Choctaw. Same thing in the Philippines. You have the main tribes, and you even have sub-tribes of those tribes. So each one of those tribes have different patterns. Go back. Speed your habits. Speed your habits. So for men, the tattoos were earned. For men, you were allowed a tattoo when you proved your bravery in a battle. That's why they're called warrior tattoos. It was sort of like the stripes on your uniform in the military. Every time you performed an act of bravery or loyalty to your tribe or to your village, you were allowed another tattoo. When you took a head, you got a tattoo. Even participating in a raid that took a head, you got a tattoo. We call that taking heads. In modern day terms, we can't take the heads of our enemy anymore. So we earn our tattoos by taking heads, by imparting knowledge, which we're doing today. So I should get a lot of tattoos today. But that's how we rationalize in today's modern society, is taking heads to impart knowledge. For women, they were a sign of beauty. And we have some beautiful women from our tattoo tribe today who will show you their tattoos. And a lot of those tattoo symbols were just a continuation of the patterns on the textiles. Because in the Philippines, they only wore skirts. They were basically topless. So the tattoos were a sign of beauty. Also, for women, the more tattoos you had, the more marriageable you were, or the better partner you were going to be, the better mother you're going to be, because it showed that if you can withstand the pain of getting all these tattoos, you can withstand the pain of what? Childbirth. Childbirth. Therefore, making you a better partner and mother. Okay? All of these, the tattoos were just put on for vanity's sake. There were meanings and reasons for putting on the tattoos. Like I said, only warriors were allowed tattoos. They signified rank in the village, so the more tattoos you have on your chest and on your chin and on your face, the facial tattoos were the epitome of the highest ranking warriors within the tribe. Sort of like the Maori tattoos in the face. We only have maybe two or three people in our whole tattoo tribe that have the full facial tattoos. They also had protective and spiritual meanings as well. We talk about our animal totems. So a lot of the symbols on our bodies are tied to the animals that were in the Philippines, from dogs or the aso, scorpions, the centipede, birds, snakes. All of these had deep meanings for us. Some of them, like the centipede, were protective tattoos, so they would protect the wearer of the tattoo when they went to war or battle, and also from sickness or from evil spirits. So they had spiritual meanings as well. This is a tribe, a Kalinga tribe tattoo taken at the earlier part of last century. So the United States governed the Philippines from 1898 till 1946. Matter of fact, we celebrate Philippine Independence Day on June 12, 1898. And Philippine Independence Day has a direct relationship to Vallejo, believe it or not. Because for over 300 years, Spain ruled the Philippines, and they ruled it with an iron fist. And the United States went over there during the Spanish-American War, and they were able to buy the Philippines for $20 million from the Spanish. They got the Philippines, Cuba, Puerto Rico, Marianas Islands, but only Cuba was given its independence. Shortly thereafter, the Filipinos, feeling betrayed by the United States for now taking over their country instead of giving them their own independent country to the governor, started the war against the United States, the American War. But on June 12, or May 1898, the ships that went to the Battle of Manila Bay that led to independence actually came from Mare Island. So when we celebrate Peace of San on June 12th, or every June on the Vallejo waterfront, we're probably one of the only places in the whole United States that has a direct correlation to that Declaration of Independence, because you can see it right there. So anyway, so these warriors here, I want you to look at their bodies. The women, look at their bodies. These guys were cut. These guys were muscular. They didn't have 24-hour fitness. They didn't have Planet Fitness or In Shape. The men back then, they worked in the fields. They worked on the rice terraces. They were fishermen. They were farmers. They were craftsmen. They were using their hands all the time. And they always had blades, bowl knives, or some kind of knife. Because in the Philippines, different parts of the Philippines have different styles of blades. And I have a variety of different blades here on display on the table. But the Filipino men and women had to always be ready to fight. Because with 7,100 different islands divided by villages and tribes, we were always in danger of being attacked by not only invaders like the Spanish, the Americans, and then the Japanese, but also by other tribes. We had tribal wars, especially in the north. We fought each other for territory, for land to hunt and gather. So there were all kinds of tribal wars. Even today, there's still some animosity between different tribes. So from a very early age, the men and the women had to learn how to fight. And that's why we have Filipino martial arts. And we have a couple of Filipino martial artists in here who are still trained to this day, carrying on our heritage as Filipino warriors. Next slide. So I'm going to show the differences between some of the tribes. So the Visayan tribe actually has very linear patterns as well as circular patterns, not only on their chests, you see here, around their nipple area and their bellies, but also on their buttocks. So if you see a Filipino with these types of tattoo patterns, you know right away that they're Visayan. They're not Ilocano, they're not Ifugao, they're not from Mindanao, but they are specifically Visayan. Do we have any Visayan people here? Come on, we gotta have some Visayans over here. Vallejo has a lot of Visayans.
I'm there, too.
Next slide. Ibaloy is another tribe. These have bold curvature on their chop lines. So this is the Ibaloy tribe. The Ibaloy were also known for mummifying their dead. So it wasn't just the Egyptians who mummified their dead, but also the Filipinos, or the Ibaloy tribe. And the reason that they did that instead of burying them in the ground is they felt that if you put the dead in the ground, their spirit will come up and destroy the crops that are in the ground. So in some parts of the Philippines, after they mummify them, they'll put them in a like a log casket, and then they will either put them in caves, or they will put them in on cliffs like in Sagada, or they will just keep them sometimes in their ancestral homes, just wrapped up in their blankets. But some of these mummies, you can still see the tattoos on them, even though they're over 100 years old. Next slide. Kalinga. The Kalinga were the mortal enemies of my tribe, the Ifugao tribe. And they were known as they had very fancy headdresses and jewelry, very colorful clothing. This is, we call him the chief. He was a chief in the Marines, and he's one of the oldest male members of our tribe, and he is the only one that has the full facial tattoos. And most of these tribes that I'm talking about here are from the northern part of the Philippines. Next slide. Kalinga female tattoos. Again, the female tattoos were a sign of beauty. You can see the textiles here. And it's just a continuation of the patterns. So most of the patterns for the females are derived from plants, from nature. So you see some of that with our female tattoo members. Next slide. And this is my tribe, the Ifugao tribe. And you can see how different the patterns are on the Ifugao men and the Ifugao woman. Matter of fact, my niece is here, and she is the first female, probably in about 100 years, that has received the traditional Ifugao tattoo patterns. Next slide. This was taken last August as well. So this is Kayla, who will be speaking, whose photograph is in the exhibit, and this is that same young lady earlier, over 100 years ago. So the earlier pictures that you see up here, most of them were taken by Dean Worcester or some of his men when the United States first acquired the Philippines as their new territory. They sent anthropologists and photographers to catalog all the native tribes in the Philippines, and then they put it into a book called Our Islands and Their Peoples, because they did that in Puerto Rico and in Samoa, in the Marianas Islands. Or they ended up in the 1912 National Geographic issue that for the first time showed these pictures of our ancestors. And this is how we get our reference for our tattoos today, is from these old history books in National Geographic. Next slide. The Manolo tribe is from the southern part of the Philippines in Mindanao. Again, the Philippines is about the length of California, maybe a little bit longer. So there was no one united Filipino culture in the Philippines because we were separated by ocean, by jungles, by mountain ranges. So there wasn't one singular Filipino identity. All these people throughout the Philippines have their own identity based on their tribes. So the Manobo was very, very, very different than the northern tribes, who were not Christians either. The Manobo had their own cultures. And of course, throughout the southern part of the Philippines, you have a lot of the Muslim culture. Next slide. These are some of the tools. We call it batok is the name we call tattooing. So mam batok is a person who tattoos. So traditionally they're done either with tapping tools or poking tools. So they tap or they poke. My tattoos were done 3 ways. They were done with a machine, a modern machine. They're also done with tapping tool. They're also done with a poking tool. And I'll have some samples of the tools up here that were actually used to do my tattoos. Next slide. And you're probably wondering what the ink was made of. Back then it was made out of soot and sugarcane juice is one of the ways they made that ink. And the needle in the old days was made out of a calamansi or citrus tree thorn. So in our tribe, and here in America, we can't legally do tattoos with those natural ingredients, although there is one tattooist here in America that does do it, but he does sterilize the citrus tree or the lemon tree thorns, and he did my tattoo here. So he does do it, but again, it wouldn't pass the health department rules. But our tribe that has a tattoo parlor down in Southern California in Stanton by Buena Park, we use sterilized tattoo needles. Apu Wan Od is the oldest and the last Mambatok left in the world. I think she's about 100 years old now. And she lives in Kalinga in a little village called Buscalan. So a lot of people now are taking that trek up to see her, and Dion has gone up there, right, Dion? So Dion will talk about that trek going to see her. So she's trying to teach this to her niece and some other young ladies in that tribe. But she, to me, is a living treasure in the Philippines. Next slide. So she uses a reverse tapping technique. And actually our tribe leader was able to give her a tattoo. So he's like bringing it full circle. Next slide. So hand poking. This looks like this. And so you're probably wondering, does it hurt? All tattoos hurt. I don't care if you're getting it by the machine, or by poking, or by tapping, they all hurt. What determines the amount of pain is what part of the body you're doing it on. So, on the arms, the outer part of your arms, not so bad. But on the chest, yes. Closer to the nipples, hell yes. Some parts of the leg, yes, because we got a lot of nerves going behind our knee and back of our leg. So underneath the arms, yes. Along the belly, yes. So it depends on what part of the body, but does it hurt? It all hurts. It all hurts. And sometimes we're under the needle for, it could be as long as 8 hours or even longer. So a typical session, to us a short session is probably 3 hours. But I probably have 40 hours worth of tattooing on my body. Not all at the same time. Next slide. So the modern machine is what most of us have our tattoos done with. Not only is it more sterile, but it's more efficient. Right? It's just more efficient. And you're able to do it a lot faster than tapping. And tapping, it takes 3 people. It takes a tapper and it takes 2 people to stretch your skin while you're doing it. Whereas with the machine, you just need the tattooist who's actually stretching the skin with his other hand. Because a tapper, you need 2 hands. Next slide. So these are the different tattoo symbols. I'm not going to go into the deep meanings of them because I want the members of the tribe to talk about the meanings of their tattoos. But like tattoo parlors here in America, you can go and look at a sheet of paper, it's called flash, and choose your tattoo. Some of the tattooists in the Philippines are starting now to have these patterns and giving tattoo patterns to people wanting the traditional tattoo patterns. But, for us, it's not so much just the act of going to a tattoo artist and giving them the patterns, but you want your tattoo artist to know what they need. You know, for us, mana, or their life spirit, is very, very important. We want that tattoo artist to understand and know the history of what they're putting on us, and not just copying the design. And in fact, we kind of look down upon some other tattoo artists who might see a member of our tribe on the internet, on Pinterest, or on social media, and copy that tattoo and put it on somebody else. You know, those tattoos are personal to us, they're personal to our family, they tell our family story, we earned those tattoos, so we don't like to see people copy the way our patterns are put on our body. Although there are patterns that you can put on your body, we don't have a copyright on these patterns because these are ancient patterns, but sometimes the way that our tattoo artists from our tribe put them on is very artistic and very stylized, and when we see that, we look down upon it. Next slide. This is a tattoo warrior, and you can see Kinilat is lightning. This is the pattern he has here on his neck. The bird, or juju, and throughout different Polynesian cultures and throughout other parts of the Philippines, the bird is a very important figure, and I'll talk about that when I talk about my tattoos. The neck ladder, the ardan, that's the warrior's ladder. That's his guide from today into the afterlife. The scorpion, I like to call it the ipit ipit. The Ilocanos know what that means. It's an inch. That's a true sign of a warrior. That's the warrior pattern. I'll talk about that as well. The gayaman, or the centipede. The aso, or the dog. I'll talk about that as well. The fern leaf and the river, Karaya. So those are what are on this man's body. He's probably a relative of mine. You can see some of the same features. And I'll talk about what those meanings are. And it's my turn to share. Next slide. So there's the gayaman, or the centipede. Next slide. The ufuk, or it's like the scales of the snake. Next. The inangkid, which is the fern. Mostly these are put on females. Next slide. The kapi. This is from the Mangyan tribe. Where's Alex? So this is specifically from the Mangyan tribe, which is in the central part of the Philippines, of Luzon. Next slide. The Tinukos, like the river. Next slide. The panyat is, it could have different meanings in different tribes. So it could be eyes. All the eyes. Also could be the palay, the new rice that's, when it's gathered up, it's tied together and makes this pattern when they dry it. The next slide. This is the dog. We call it aso in my language. And that has very deep meanings. I'll talk about that later. Next slide. The chila na uru. This is like the tongue of the snake. Next slide. The ginawan, which is the frigate gull. I'll talk about that as well. Just want to show you the symbols. Next slide. The ladder. Next slide. Kinilat, we talked about that earlier, which is the lightning. It connects the heavens to the earth. Very powerful symbol. Next slide. The polling is the eagle. Next slide. And then the Tinagos are ancestors. So a lot of us have these symbols on our bodies honoring our ancestors. Next slide. The ipit ipit again, and these can be tattooed and drawn different ways. Next slide. The bongo, again, it references the mountains sometimes. Next slide. The pangtiti, again, the feet of the centipede. Next slide. The pado is also like a river, because from the mountains to the ocean, it's connected by these different rivers, like the Chico River. Next slide. The linglingo. Linglingo is our fertility symbol, not just fertility for women giving birth, but also fertility of action, fertility of thought. And my friend Tanya has some linglingos on display, and even for sale, right? On the table. Yeah. Very important symbol in our traditional indigenous Filipino culture, and all of us within the tribe have a linglingo, or at least one linglingo, somewhere on our body. Next slide. Baybayin, which is our ancient Filipino alphabet. Previously, people referred to as Alibata, but we have since returned to calling it Baybayin. Based on Sanskrit, it is not a traditional Filipino tattoo pattern. It's something more Fil-Am that they have started putting on their body. As a matter of fact, my very first tattoo was a Baybayin tattoo of my last name, Orpilia. So there's nothing wrong with it, but it's not what we would call a traditional Filipino warrior tattoo. And we know that because by looking at all the photos from the turn of the century, none of our ancestors had Baybayin on their bodies. Next slide. So today we are representing the Tatak ng Apat na Alon tribe, also known as Mark of Four Waves. And El Festin is our founder. What happened was in 1996, he went to Hawaii with a bunch of his buddies, hanging out. They saw some native Hawaiians with their beautiful tattoos. And so he went to a local tattoo artist named Po'ino and asked him to give him some Polynesian tattoos. And Po'ino said no. He says, you're not Polynesian, you're Filipino. I want you to go research your own traditional Filipino tattoos. And El, after that time, did not even think about his own traditional Filipino tattoos. But that's what started him on this journey. So from that moment on, he started immersing himself in Philippine culture and Filipino traditional tattoos. And in 1998, he founded this group called Mark of Four Waves. Next slide. So these are members of our tribe, and we come from all walks of life. There are college professors or people like me who work for the government. There are attorneys, there are nurses, there are, we're breaking the stereotype of what most people think who people get tattoos are. Matter of fact, when we opened up our tattoo parlor in Stanton, California, up to that point there were no tattoo parlors in Stanton, California. And so El and the other tribe members asked me to come up and testify in front of the city council and explain to them, who we are, what we did, and how this isn't your traditional tattoo parlor, and that it really was a cultural museum that happened to do tattoos. And talked about some of the people who were members of the tribe, and they got their license to operate, and that's where we're based today. Next slide. So some of our beautiful women in the tribe, and we come from all over the United States, from the East Coast, from the Southwest, of course from California, Washington State, and Hawaii. And every year or every other year we gather and we do ceremonies to initiate new members in the tribe. So it's become one huge family. And again, like most of these members of the tribe, they're Phil-Ams like myself, who up until this time didn't have a tangible connection to our Filipino roots or Filipino ancestors. So for me it was studying, training, and teaching Filipino martial arts, as well as studying and displaying and receiving my sacred indigenous Filipino tattoos, which were an external manifestation of my internal arts of Filipino martial arts. So Filipino martial arts and tattoos go hand in hand, because only warriors were allowed to get them. Next slide. These are, again, some women in our tribe. Isla's from the East Coast, right? She's from Delaware? I think so, yeah. Delaware, right. And then Mananati, she's from Kalinga in the Philippines. She actually worked for a governmental agency in the northern part of the Philippines, helping the indigenous people. So she's the oldest female in our tribe, and she's Kalinga herself. So she started reviving tattoos on her own body because these are the people that she's helping. Next slide. This is to join the tribe. If you really want to become a member of the tribe and be part of all of these ceremonies, you have to fill out a questionnaire, and then you have to be accepted into the tribe. There's a lot of research that went into our tattoos. It wasn't like all of a sudden we knew who we were and where our families came from, our ancestors came from. No, these are probing questions, and it takes a lot of asking questions of our lolos or lolas or great aunts or oldest people that we know in our family to get some of the answers to these questions, because like I said, there are so many tribes in the Philippines, you don't want to put the wrong patterns on your body. You don't want to put female patterns on your body. You don't want to put your opposing tribes patterns on your body. You want to make sure you get it right, because once you get a tattoo, it's on there for life, right, Judy? It's on there for life. You can't erase it. You can cover it up, but you can't erase it. So this is online. This is if people want to get a traditional tattoo and become a member of the tribe. You can also go to our tattoo parlor and get some of these traditional patterns without becoming a member of the tribe. And this guide here helps people understand their different animal totems. Next slide. So that's my presentation on Filipino warrior indigenous tattoos. This is a picture inside of our tattoo shop in Stanton, California. I'm not going to say thank you yet, because I want to have some of our members come up, and I think I'm going to have Dion come up. We need to honor the elders first. So I think besides me, Dion is the second oldest. I want my colleagues to be able to speak. Come on, Dion. He asked me how long he has to speak. So we might be, these guys start getting long-winded, just
start rolling the credits. Wow, it's great to be here with you all today. It's kind of ironic that it's a historical place, because my story is pretty in-depth history. And as you can see, this patch over here is the 1st Filipino Infantry Mel was talking about earlier. That is my history. My grandfather, who came here from the Philippines in 1925 to work in the fields, and that's what he did. He later joined the 1st Filipino Infantry in World War II. And it's funny that I'm a product of that, because I don't know if you know this history, but I think it was 1947. Before 1947, Filipinos could not marry American
white women.
White women. Can I say that?
You can say that.
Okay. Well, my grandmother's white, so I can say that.
So the anti-miscegenation laws, California is one of 12 states where Filipino men could not marry white women.
Yeah. So basically, when we got here, it was the ratio at that time was 23 Filipino men to 1 Filipino woman. So I don't think 23 Filipino men are going to fight for 1 Filipino woman. So they had to marry. They didn't have to, but you know, they did anyway. They married white women, and I'm the product of that. Actually, he had to get on a special bus while he was in service and go to New Mexico to get married. So a little bit of history about that. I throw that in there because that's some important history about California that you probably didn't know. Anyway, let me go back to my notes here. My grandfather basically was my only way into my culture, Filipino culture, that is. Because, like I said, my mother went more to the other side, my grandmother's side. My grandfather raised her really tough, the Ilocano way. I don't know if you guys know about that, but sometimes the Ilocano way was pretty rough, especially coming in those days. So my mother was more to the American side. Actually, my grandma was from New Orleans, and so my mother loved New Orleans. So when my grandfather died, when I was 7, I pretty much lost my whole culture. He was the only one. He taught me how to fish. He taught me how to speak the language. He taught me how to eat with my fingers. I haven't done it since. So I was basically cut off from my Filipino culture. I was raised in the Mission District of San Francisco, California, and I don't know if you guys know, in 1970.
And so I told my mom I was going to get some tattoos that would kind of honor his life for passing away on our land. And that pretty much ties into what I have on tattooed on my skin right now. So I hope that was not too long, but yeah. And then, so some of the markings, I have the centipede markings, which is represents life and protection, and then I also have a lingling of myself right here in the center, which is symbolizing fertility, and then I also have the mark of the four wigs symbol right over here on both sides. That represents mark of the four wigs.
Thank you. Next up, we have a very special guest, a dear old friend of mine, and I didn't realize she was going to come today, but she has some traditional tattoos as well, not done by specifically to mark of her ways, but she does have some traditional Filipino indigenous tattoos done the traditional way by a person who was a former member of our tribe. So, Titania, and she'll tell you her family story, which is very, very interesting.
I don't know about interesting, but
Sure it is.
people seem to think it's very interesting.
It is interesting.
I grew up in Alaska, and when my family first came to Alaska in the 60s, there were still some Native Alaskans who had tattoos. And I was pretty young, and at the time, this was long before native land claims, it was long before the pipeline. People who lived in rural Alaska lived the old way, the way that their ancestors had lived for thousands of years off of the land. And when they would come into town, they'd be discriminated against if they had tattoos. And so it was really looked down upon. And that was just something that I remember when many, many years later in Berkeley, there was a cultural site called Pusud. And I used to hang out there, even before they completed building the building, when they were still doing remodeling on it. I would go there and I would play music, because I played traditional music of the Southern Philippines. I played kulintang. And I also later played traditional music from the Northern Philippines. I played the gansa. And that was where I found out about this group. And I guess this was what this was the booklet that they had, where the tribe had a big photo exhibit, and they had a professor from Baguio, in the Northern Philippines, who was showing her photographs. And it wasn't just tattoos, but it was also teeth blackening, which really surprised me, because I hadn't really thought about teeth blackening being there. I knew it was something that was done in the Pacific Islands. I didn't know it was done in the Philippines. And then the tattoos, I didn't really know that they were Philippine tattoos. Well, I really loved it, and I ended up buying one of those really lovely photographs she had on canvas. It was a fundraiser for the tribe. So then later on met someone who, through another group, who had started making these tattoos, doing the hand tap tattoos. And when he wrote this book, Filipino Tattoos, Ancient to Modern, which you can get at different places, including on Amazon, I was asked to perform traditional kulintang music at his book readings that were held up in Sonoma County in San Francisco. And at the third or fourth time I had played music in one of his book readings, at his book launch, many book launches, one of my girlfriends was invited, and she was playing music with me. And afterwards, she came running up to me and she said, "Let's get tattoos." And I said, "Why?" And she says, "What do you mean, why?" I said, "Well, I'm not just going to get a tattoo." And she said, "Because if you get one, I'll get one." And I thought that was the craziest thing I ever heard. But I thought, fine, let's go up to the author and we'll say, could you work on maybe getting tattoos for us? What kind of tattoos we would need. Years and years passed, and then I ended up being invited to a retreat where he was doing a tattoo. And he put out the call. He said, "Anyone who wants a tattoo, I'm going to be tattooing for 3 days." So I sent him an email, which conveniently he never received. And I thought, oh, it's my mother who had passed away. So Mel really wants me to talk about my mother, because my mother was the very first Filipino-American legislator in the United States, elected in Alaska in 1972. And my mother was never elected because she was Filipino, but in spite of it, because Alaska is I always call it a very redneck state, and it's a very red state. It's a very red state. My mother was a force, because the first thing she would do when she would meet people is they wanted to know if she was Native Alaskan, because if she was, they weren't going to talk to her. They wanted to know if she was African American, because if she was, they weren't going to talk to her. But she was something they didn't really know what that was, Filipino. They didn't know what that was. And so they would start talking to her, and then they'd be bowled over by how smart she was and how really, what a good politician she was. My mother, when she first came to this country, which is 1951, she never met any other Filipinos until we moved to Alaska in the 60s. And she ended up becoming a born-again Filipino. But I've had a lot of health problems in my life. So when Lane asked me, my tattoo, the guy, he asked me where I wanted the tattoo. I said, I have no idea. I've never wanted a tattoo, so I've never really thought to it. So we had to think about it. I made to think of a place where I wasn't going to need surgery again. So it ended up being on this arm. So this actually took quite a long time for us to come up. It took 4 or 5 different sessions because we really didn't know what we were doing. But he did know that he wanted to have symbols from the southern Philippines because that's the music that I play, symbols from the northern Philippines because that's my cultural heritage and my genetic heritage. And when I first showed this to my husband, it was much smaller, and he also said because the lines aren't straight, he said, it's like all over the place. And I said, like me. I'm all over the place. I said, I really feel like it represents me pretty well. But it was done with a lemon thorn. And yeah, it was. It didn't actually hurt me so much at the time because I was in chemotherapy at the time. And I had a different sense of sensation at the time. So it was difficult. But I really love my tattoo, and I've since had my feet tattooed as well. So thank you very much.
What we find out is you can't just get one tattoo. Tattoos are addicting. You can't just get one tattoo. I'm going to ask my niece Kayla to come up. Kayla is my brother's daughter. She is an Asian American Studies student at San Francisco State University, and she's the first female, probably in the whole world, that has gotten the female ifugal tattoos in the last 100 years. So when we talk about reviving tattoos, she has really revived the female ifugal tattoos. Come on, Kayla. And Kayla is featured in the exhibit.
My tattoo journey, I actually didn't really know my Filipino culture until I went to college. I mean, I would hear stories from my uncle about my ancestors, but it really didn't.
She never listens to me.
Yeah. Yeah. So then I went to SFC, and then I joined the Filipino organization on campus, and that's where I really delved into my Filipino culture, and then it's I just learned about majority of my tattoos from my dad and my uncle, and I always knew I wanted to get my tattoo as spiritual journey, and then so I got my first one on my right arm in August of last year, and my left arm I just got this last week actually. So majority of these symbols represent nature. I have the centipede wrapped around here, and then the ferns, and then the snakes, and then the scorpions. And on this arm I have the fern again, and then the centipedes, and then the rice symbol, and then another centipede. I originally only wanted a band on my arm, and then El Festin, he was talking to me about the symbols and all stuff, and then it just resonated with me, so it's my first tattoo. Yeah. Now I have 2 sleeves now. That's pretty much it.
All right, thank you. I'll go last. We all talked about El Festin, and the first tattoo I got was this symbol here, and that's the Orpilia in Vallejo. And I didn't start getting tattoos till I was, I think, 40 years old. You know, when I was younger, when I was a teenager, I could have got the gang tattoos, like some of my other friends. Or what I really wanted was the zigzag man with a marijuana leaf in the background. Thank God I didn't get that. So it kind of tells you what my growing up years were like. But at that time, one of the most famous Polynesian tattoo artists in the world was a woman named Trisha Allen. And she has a PhD in Polynesian tattooing out of Hawaii. So I got a hold of Trisha because her father lives in Pleasanton, and she did tattooing at her father's house. So I called Trisha, and we started communicating, and she started showing me patterns. I said, well, you know, that's not really a Filipino pattern. She sent me something else. I said, that's not really a Filipino pattern. Because I had a knowledge of the Filipino patterns, and what she was showing me was more generic Polynesian. And finally she says, well, I know this guy named L. Feston. And so I went down to LA and I met Elle at a Hawaiian store where Trisha was doing some tattooing. And like what Dion was saying, here's a picture of Elle just drawing on my arm. As I'm talking, telling him my Filipino story, he's actually drawing the patterns on my arm. And so we took a picture of those patterns, and about a month later I met Trisha in Pleasanton, where she actually tattooed those patterns that Elle drew on my arms onto my skin. And that was the beginning of the first of many tattoos through Elle, but not always by Elle. Some of them were through people he was mentoring and teaching to do these traditional tattoos. And at that time, Elle wasn't even doing tattoos. He and his wife Zell, who now do most of the patterns and tattooing at our tattoo parlor. Back in the late 90s, he wasn't even tattooing. He was still learning himself. But he knew more than anyone what the patterns meant. So some of my patterns all my patterns for the most part are tied to the Ifugao tribe. So this is a Ifugao shield where you have my Baibayan in. And then you can see the cross marks, the patterns that look like basket weaving patterns. That's very typical amongst Filipino tattoos because it shows the closeness and tightness of the Filipino culture. And at the top of the shield, which represents warriors, is a linglino. On this side here, you have what it's called the ahas, or the scales of the snake. A snake is a warrior animal totem as well because the snake is deadly, it's fast, it's strong, but it's also stealthy. So, and snakes were protectors. They protected the houses and the fields and the rice from things like rats and mice. Up here we have what's called the palay. Palay is the new rice sprouting. So it represented new life. And for me it was this new beginning of learning about my Filipino roots and my Filipino tattoos. And right underneath it are the patterns of the Filipino rice terraces. So in the northern part of the Philippines, where my ancestors come from, we have the Banawi rice terraces, which were built by the Ifugao people over 10,000 years ago. And it's considered the eighth wonder of the world because even today, modern scientists and engineers cannot figure out how these supposedly primitive people built these rice terraces without the wheel or modern machinery. And they're still being used today. And I actually got to hike on those rice terraces in 1996, and it really was a spiritual experience to walk on these terraces knowing that my ancestors not only walked these same paths, but also built them. On this side, this main symbol here is the bulul, or the rice god. So, like a lot of Asian cultures, but especially the Ifugao who live in the northern mountains, rice was life. And with the bulul, there were 7 different rituals to ensure a bountiful harvest. So from the time you plant to the time it's growing, to the time you harvest, and even while it is in the granaries, you have a male and female bulul in the granaries to protect it, as well as to make it more bountiful. It's supposed to increase the amount of rice in the granaries. I have a small bulul on the table there. The goals represent hope and direction. So I have them here and I have them here. And the gulls were very important to Filipinos because when we were out in the ocean in our bancas, fishing or exploring to other islands, and we didn't know where land was, at dusk we would look in the sky because we knew at dusk all the gulls would be heading towards land. So it gave us direction, but also gave us hope that we'd be safe on land. This is a ipit, or the scorpion. The scorpion, again, of the sign of the word because they were strong, they were fast, and they were deadly. And only the warriors were allowed the scorpion tattoo. On my chest, I have the ancestors. And I also have 3 dogs. So always 3 dogs for the Ifugao people. So one, the dog was our companion, our friend. Like me, I have 3 dogs, and it's like my children. Secondly, they helped us hunt, which provided food for our table. And third, they were our guides in the afterlife. Again, here's another symbol for the scorpion, my linglingo. Some more ancestors, the carabao, which is the water buffalo, which signifies strength and loyalty and productivity. This is the gayaman, or the centipede, again a spiritual protective tattoo. And here is the ladder. Let me cover my nipple. Ladder. So it guides me in the afterlife. Usually they have it, they put it underneath your chin or on your neck, but because I work in a professional setting, I don't want to have any tattoos showing above my neck. So that's the gist of some of my tattoos, or most of my tattoos. Other tattoos represent the mountains where I came from, the Cordillera Mountains in the north. But that's pretty much it. And the only non-Filipino tattoo I have on my body is behind my neck. And I got that in Cambodia 4 or 5 years ago. I was cycling through the countryside, and I came upon a little Buddhist temple, and there were some young Buddhist monks outside who had Buddhist tattoos all over their body. And when they saw me come up on a bicycle by myself, well, I had a guide, they saw my tattoos, and they wanted to give me a protective tattoo for my travel. So this is called a Sakyant tattoo, and it represents the pillars of Buddhism and your path to enlightenment. So that's what was done on the back of my neck. But I was in Cambodia to explore the similarities and the connections between our Filipino culture, or primarily our Ifugao culture, and the Khmer culture. In their culture, they also have lingo, just like us. We call it lingo, they call it lingo. The people look just like us. And, I feel that if the Spanish never came to the Philippines with Catholicism, we'd probably be all the same culture and religion. So I like to do those kind of spiritual journeys or cultural journeys throughout Southeast Asia. I've been to various countries to find those connections. So with that, I want to thank you for coming to our lecture today. I have some artifacts up here and some books that you can look at. I also have some of my books for sale. I wrote Filipinos in Vallejo, again, our Filipino-American history, for sale here at the museum. And just come up and look at some of the tools and the maps and some of the weapons. And I want to thank you very, very much for joining me on this journey today. Thank my tribe members, Troy, Taylor,